The universe has a way of reminding even the mightiest that they know nothing at all. For 3,000 years, the Cathar Dominion had ruled the stars with absolute certainty, convinced they had seen everything, catalogued everything, conquered everything. They were wrong. Deep in the obsidian void between star systems, a single vessel flickered into existence. Not with the clean, measured precision of known jump technology, but with a violent tear in space itself, like a wound ripping open in reality. Emergency beacons screamed into the darkness, broadcasting distress on frequencies that hadn't been used by any civilization in recorded history. Station. Commander Vren stood before the detection array, his forearms crossed in contemplation. His silver skin reflected the amber warning lights that now bathed the command center. Around him, technicians from a dozen different species worked in controlled chaos, trying to make sense of readings that contradicted everything they understood about physics. "Talk to me, Sector Analyst Mira," Vren said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had defended this border for 20 cycles without incident. Mira, a young Cathar female with the distinctive bronze markings at the scholar caste, manipulated holographic data with trembling hands. Her training had prepared her for pirates, smugglers, even the occasional territorial dispute. Not this. "Commander, the vessel matches no known configuration in our entire database. I've cross-referenced against every spacefaring species we've encountered in 3 millennia. The hull composition alone is impossible. It's using materials we've never seen combined in this way. Metals that shouldn't hold structural integrity at faster-than-light speeds, according to our physics models. Yet somehow it traveled between stars." Vren moved closer, studying the rotating image of the damaged ship. It was ugly by Cathar standards. No elegant curves, no aesthetic flourishes, just brutal functionality. Thick armor plates welded at harsh angles, exposed conduits running along the exterior like veins, weapon systems that looked primitive yet disturbingly effective. It reminded him of something ancient, something that fought to survive rather than to impress. "Life signs?" he asked, confirmed. 38 distinct biosignatures, all fading fast. Their life support is failing. Hull breaches on 7 decks. Radiation leaking from their power core. "Commander, if we don't act within the hour, they'll all be dead." Vren's mandibles clicked together in thought. Protocol was clear. Unknown vessels were to be quarantined, scanned, and only after thorough analysis would rescue operations begin. But protocol also stated that the Dominion was benevolent, that they extended compassion to all sentient life. Let them die and face questions from high command, or rescue them and potentially introduce an unknown threat into Dominion space. Deploy the redemption and the vigilance. Have them lock tractor beams and bring that ship to quarantine dock 7. Medical teams on standby. Security teams armed and ready. If anything moves wrong, I want it contained immediately. The orders flowed through the chain of command with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, 2 Cathar patrol cruisers detached from the station, their sleek forms gliding through space with the grace of predators. They approached the dying vessel carefully, scanning for weapons, for traps, for any sign of deception. There was nothing. Just a ship full of dying beings drifting in the void. Officer Tavik commanded the boarding operation from the Redemption. He was a veteran, scarred from a dozen border conflicts, his carapace bearing the marks of plasma burns that had nearly killed him decades ago. He trusted his instincts, and right now his instincts were screaming that something was deeply wrong with this situation. "Cut through the auxiliary airlock," he ordered his team. "Atmosphere inside is nearly depleted. Full containment suits. Weapons ready, but not aimed. These beings are dying, but that doesn't mean they're harmless." The airlock yielded to their cutting torches, metal peeling away in glowing strips. Tavik was first through, his rifle raised, scanning the dark corridor beyond. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting everything in a sickly red glow. The temperature was dropping fast. Frost formed on the walls. He could see his breath, even through his helmet's environmental systems. They found the survivors in the central habitat section, huddled together for warmth. Tavik had seen desperate beings before, but this was different. These creatures looked like they'd been through hell and somehow crawled out the other side. They were bipedal, similar in basic structure to dozens of species he knew, but their eyes held something he'd never seen before. Not fear, not resignation. Something harder. Something that refused to break even as their bodies failed. The apparent leader stepped forward. A male, Tavik assessed, based on body structure and social positioning. Tall for his species, with dark hair streaked with premature gray and skin weathered by hardship. He wore what might have once been a uniform, now torn and stained. When he spoke, the words meant nothing, but the translator, AI, immediately began processing, building patterns, searching for meaning. Medical emergency, Tavik spoke into his comm. All survivors are critical. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple injuries. Get the medical bay prepared for mass casualty intake. The male leader kept speaking, his voice growing urgent. The translator chirped, catching fragments. Help. Warning. They're coming. Danger. Tavik felt his spine ridges rise instinctively. Who's coming? But the male collapsed before the translator could parse an answer. His people caught him, lowering him gently to the frozen deck. They looked at Tavik with those hard, unyielding eyes, and he understood. These beings had survived something terrible, something that had pushed them to the absolute edge of death. They had crossed unknown space in a dying ship with failing systems, and somehow lived through it. Whatever had done this to them was still out there back on the station. Commander Vren watched the rescue operation through multiple camera feeds. The survivors were being transferred to the medical wing, each one scanned and processed according to strict quarantine protocols. But something nagged at him. Something about the way the damaged ship hung in the tractor beams, its dead weapon systems pointing outward, its scarred hull bearing the marks of combat. This wasn't a colony ship fleeing disaster. This was a warship that had lost a battle. Myra, I want a full analysis of that vessel's weapon systems. I want to know what they were fighting and what fought back. And I want it done before those survivors wake up. Because Vren had a terrible suspicion. These beings hadn't stumbled into Dominion space by accident. They'd been running. And if something could do this to them, could push them to the brink of extinction, could force them to flee across the stars with whatever weapons they could carry, then that something might already be following their trail. The medical wing of Station Outpost 77 had never seen anything quite like this. Dr. Kelleth moved between examination pods with practiced efficiency, his 6 optical sensors adjusting constantly to process the streams of biological data flowing across holographic displays. He had spent 40 years studying xenobiology, had treated over 200 different species, had seen evolutionary adaptations that defied conventional understanding. Yet these newcomers, these humans as the translator, had finally confirmed they called themselves, presented mysteries that both fascinated and deeply unsettled him. Their cellular structure is aggressive, he murmured to his assistant, a young Velthian named Soren, whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent curiosity. Look at these white blood cell counts. Their immune systems don't just defend, they hunt. I've introduced controlled pathogens that would kill most species within hours, and their bodies are already producing countermeasures. It's as if they evolved on a world trying desperately to kill them. Soren manipulated the neural scan of one patient, a female with copper-colored hair, matted with dried blood. Doctor, their brain chemistry shows elevated stress hormones that should have caused system failure weeks ago. They've been operating in survival mode for so long that it's become their baseline. How are they even conscious? Willpower, perhaps, Kelleth said quietly. Or something we don't have words for yet. In the secure interview chamber 3 levels below, Officer Tavik sat across from the male leader who had collapsed during rescue. The human had recovered enough to speak, though medical monitors showed his body was still critically depleted. He'd given his name as Lieutenant Damon Wright, military designation from something called the United Colonies Defense Force. The translator worked smoothly now, having processed enough of their language to build functional communication. "Tell me what happened to your people," Tavik said, keeping his voice neutral. He'd learned that these humans responded better to directness than careful diplomatic phrasing. Wright's eyes, a startling shade of blue that reminded Tavik of certain energy weapons, fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. "We were the last line. Colony Defense Station Breakwater, orbiting a world called Haven's Reach. 300,000 colonists on the surface. 57 ships in our defense fleet. We thought we were prepared. Prepared for what? The Devourers." Wright's hands clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. "That's what we called them. We never learned their real name. They didn't communicate, didn't negotiate, didn't respond to any attempt at contact. They just came through our system like locusts, consuming everything. Their ships were organic, Commander. Living things the size of cities, with weapons that turned matter into energy and fed it back into themselves. They ate our stations, our ships, our orbital platforms. And when they finished with those, they started on the planet." Tavik felt his blood chill despite the room's controlled temperature. "You're describing a species we've never encountered. In 3,000 years, the Dominion has catalogued every major threat in this region of space." "Maybe we're not from your region," Wright said softly. "Our colony was on the far edge of explored space. We'd been out of contact with Earth for 2 generations, building our own civilization, making our own way. When the Devourers came, we fought them for 3 weeks. Threw everything we had at them. Nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment, experimental plasma arrays. We killed exactly 2 of their ships. They had hundreds." The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of recording equipment. Tavik leaned forward. "How did you escape?" "We didn't escape. We were sent." Wright's voice carried layers of pain. "Admiral Reeves, commander of the defense fleet, made the call. Loaded our ship, the Defiant, with every weapon we could carry, every piece of intelligence we'd gathered, every survivor we could fit. Told us to run, to warn others, to make sure someone knew what was coming." His voice broke slightly. "We jumped blind into unmapped space. Burned out half our systems doing it. Spent 4 years limping through the void, rationing food down to nothing, recycling air until it was barely breathable, just trying to find someone, anyone who could help." "And the Devourers?" Tavik asked, though he already dreaded the answer. "They consume everything in a system and move to the next. We mapped their trajectory before we left. They were heading toward denser stellar populations. Toward more food." Wright met his eyes directly. "Toward here." Commander Vren received the report in his private office, the walls displaying a real-time map of Dominion space. Myra stood before his desk, her bronze markings pale with stress. "I've analyzed the human vessel's combat logs," she said, her voice tight. "Their ship classification is a frigate middleweight combat vessel. Based on the weapon signatures in their databanks, their civilization's military technology is approximately 70% as advanced as ours. Not primitive, but not equal. Yet their records show they fought something that destroyed their entire defense fleet in less than a month." Vren's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep agitation. "Show me the sensor data they collected." The holographic display shifted. showing grainy footage of massive organic ships, their surfaces writhing with what might have been muscle or armor, or something in between. Energy weapons fired from orifices that opened and closed like mouths. Cathar ships, or ships similar to Cathar designs, were being torn apart in the footage. The timestamps were old, but not ancient. Within the last 5 years. "Freeze that," Wren commanded, pointing at a half-destroyed vessel. "Magnify Section 4. The image expanded, and Mira gasped. The ship bore the triple-star insignia of the Dominion's Eastern Frontier Fleet. A fleet that had gone silent 8 months ago. High Command had attributed it to a navigation error, an entire battle group lost to a jump miscalculation. "They've already reached our space," Wren whispered. "We've been losing ships to them, and didn't even know we were being hunted." In the medical wing, Dr. Kelleth was making discoveries that added new dimensions to his concern. He'd completed full physical assessments of all 38 survivors, and the patterns disturbed him deeply. "Soren, look at their bone density variations. These aren't random. This person," he pointed to a scan, "was exposed to sustained high-gravity maneuvering. Their skeletal structure has microfractures that healed stronger. This one has neural pathway development consistent with zero-gravity combat training. These aren't refugees. They're soldiers who've been fighting a war. Should we inform security?" Soren asked nervously. "They're no threat to us in their current condition," Kelleth said. "But I want to understand what kind of war produces survivors like this. Their bodies show adaptation to sustained combat stress. Evolution doesn't work this fast, which means their training, their conditioning, pushed their biology to its absolute limits. What were they fighting that required this level of preparation?" The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The station's long-range sensors, always sweeping the void, detected something at the extreme edge of their range. Multiple contacts. Large contacts. Moving in formation through deep space, approaching from the same vector the human ship had used. Wren stared at the tactical display, watching the contacts resolve slowly as more data came in. 15 vessels. No, 20, 30. The count kept climbing. Their signatures matched nothing in the database, but their trajectory was unmistakable. They were following the Defiance trail like predators tracking wounded prey. "Sound station-wide alert," Wren ordered, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his core. "All personnel to combat stations. Launch all patrol wings. Activate defense grid. And get Lieutenant Wright to the command center immediately." Wright arrived still wearing medical wrappings, but moving with sudden energy that belied his physical condition. He took one look at the tactical display, and his face went rigid. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. 6 hours at current speed," Mira responded. Wright turned to Wren, and the commander saw something in the human's eyes that made him understand why they'd survived 4 years in the void. Not hope, not fear, just cold, hard calculation. "Commander, you need to evacuate this station right now. Get every civilian, every non-combat person on ships, and jump them out of this system. Because what's coming doesn't take prisoners, doesn't negotiate, and doesn't stop. And if your technology is anything like ours, you're about to learn what it means to fight something that eats everything you throw at it." Wren looked at his station, his people, the 1,000 souls under his protection. Then he looked back at the approaching contacts, now numbering over 50 and still climbing. "Sound evacuation protocols," he said quietly. "All civilians to evacuation ships. Combat personnel remain. And someone get me a direct line to High Command." He paused, then added, "Tell them we're about to make first contact with a species that's already been killing us for months. And tell them to send everything they have." Because Commander Wren understood something fundamental in that moment. The humans hadn't brought danger to their doorstep. The danger had already been there, hunting in the dark. The humans had just survived long enough to warn them. The question was whether any of them would survive what came next. Evacuation sirens wailed through Station Outpost 77, like the death cry of something ancient and proud. Commander Vren watched from the command center as civilian transports detached from docking bays, their engines flaring bright against the darkness as they fled toward the inner systems. Children, families, scholars, merchants, all the fragile, beautiful diversity of Dominion life streaming away from what was coming. He had ordered the evacuation, knowing many would question his judgment, knowing High Command might consider it an overreaction. But Lieutenant Wright stood beside him now, watching the sensor displays with eyes that had already seen this nightmare unfold. And Vren trusted that haunted certainty more than 3,000 years of Imperial confidence. "They'll be here in 4 hours now," Mira reported, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. 53 confirmed contacts. Mass readings are consistent with capital ship classifications. Commander, they're bigger than anything we've ever built. Some of them register larger than our orbital defense platforms. Wright moved to the tactical display, his medical wrappings forgotten as he studied the approaching formation. The other human survivors had been brought to the command center as well, all 38 of them still weak, but standing, their eyes carrying that same hard edge of people who refused to break. Among them was a woman Wright had introduced as Specialist Nora Blackwood, their tactical analyst. She'd lost an arm in their escape, the stump now covered by basic cathar medical graphs. But her mind remained sharp. "They're using the same approach pattern they used at Haven's Reach," Blackwood said, pointing at the holographic representations. 3 waves. First wave draws your fire, absorbs your ordnance, feeds on the energy you throw at them. Second wave targets your weapons platforms while you're reloading. Third wave moves in for the station itself. She looked at Vren directly. "Commander, everything you shoot at them makes them stronger. Every missile, every plasma bolt, every particle beam. They convert it, feed on it, grow from it. That's why we lost. We kept fighting the way we knew how, and it was exactly what they wanted." Officer Tavik, now commanding the station's defense wing, turned from his console. "Then how do we fight them? We can't just not shoot." "Kinetic weapons," Wright said quietly. "Old-fashioned, brutal, physical impact. Railguns, mass drivers, anything that just throws metal at high velocity. They can't feed on simple kinetic energy the same way. It's not elegant, it's not efficient by your standards, but it's the only thing that hurt them. That and close-range nuclear detonations, the radiation does something to their organic hulls." Vren's mandibles clicked in thought. The Dominion phased out kinetic weapons 800 years ago. They're considered primitive, wasteful. Our doctrine relies on energy weapons, precision, efficiency. He paused, then straightened. But our cargo haulers use mass drivers for mining operations. "Officer Tavik, how many mining vessels do we have in this sector?" Tavik's fingers flew across his console. 17 within the hour. Another 32 within 3 hours if we recall them from the asteroid belts. Recall them all. Have their crews weaponized their mining equipment. If throwing rocks is what works, then we'll throw every rock we can find. Vren turned to his communications officer. "What's High Command's response?" "The Third Fleet is being diverted to our position. Estimated arrival in 14 hours, sir. Admiral Catherine herself is commanding. 60 capital ships, 300 support vessels, full battle deployment. They'll arrive too late to save us," Wright said, not cruelly, just stating fact. "But maybe in time to learn from what happens here. Commander, you need to set up data relays, backup recording systems, everything that can capture what's about to happen and transmit it deeper into your territory. The Devourers have been hunting you in the dark because you didn't know what you were looking at. Don't let our deaths be meaningless. Learn, adapt, survive. Something in Wright's words struck Vren deeply. This human, this stranger from beyond known space, wasn't thinking about his own survival anymore. He was thinking about what came after, about legacy, about ensuring that even in death, their struggle meant something. It was the kind of thinking Vren had seen in the oldest Dominion warriors, the ones who understood that sometimes the battle itself mattered more than living through it. "We're not dead yet, Lieutenant," Vren said firmly, "and I don't intend to make this easy for them." The next 3 hours passed in controlled chaos. Mining vessels arrived and were rapidly converted into improvised weapons platforms. Cargo containers were filled with metal debris. Asteroids were towed into position. Even the station's mass drivers normally used for launching supply pods were recalibrated as weapons. The Dominion's elegant, refined military doctrine was being stripped down to its most primitive roots. But there was something oddly right about it. Something honest. Dr. Kelleth appeared in the command center, his medical coat discarded, wearing instead a simple technician's suit. "Commander, the human survivors have refused to evacuate with the other civilians. They're requesting assignment to combat positions." Vren looked at Wright and his people, these walking wounded who could barely stand without assistance. "You've done enough. You brought us warning. That's more than we had any right to ask." "Commander," a woman stepped forward, her dark skin bearing scars from burns that had healed poorly. She'd been introduced as Lieutenant Yara Hassan, the Defiance engineer. "We've been running for 4 years. 4 years of jumping blind through space, watching our friends die of starvation, rationing oxygen molecule by molecule, all to reach someone who could fight back. We didn't survive just to watch from the sidelines." Her voice was quiet, but carried steel underneath. "We know these things. We've studied them, fought them, bled against them. Use us or waste everything we sacrificed to get here." Around the command center, Cathar officers looked at these fragile, damaged humans with new understanding. They weren't refugees seeking shelter. They were soldiers who'd walked through fire to deliver intelligence to an ally they'd never met. They were warning bells that rang themselves to pieces to wake a sleeping empire. "Specialist Blackwood, you'll work with Myra on tactical coordination," Vren said after a moment. "Lieutenant Hassan, help our engineers with the mining vessel conversions. Lieutenant Wright, you're with me. If we're going to die fighting an enemy we barely understand, I want someone next to me who knows what to expect." The sensor alerts began 2 hours earlier than predicted. The Devourers had accelerated, as if they sensed the station's preparations and hungered for the confrontation. On the visual displays, they appeared first as distortions in space, reality bending around their massive organic forms. Then they resolved into horrifying clarity. They looked like something from before intelligence, before reason, before civilization tried to make sense of the universe. Vast creatures of dark flesh stretched across skeletal frameworks larger than cities. Surfaces rippled with muscle or armor, or some fusion of both. Orifices opened across their hulls, revealing depths that glowed with bioluminescent hunger. They moved through space with terrible grace, turning reality itself into an ocean they could swim through. "First wave approaching weapons range," Mira reported. Her voice steady now, fear transformed into professional focus. 20 vessels. Mass readings consistent with Dominion battlecruiser class. "All stations hold fire," Vren commanded. "Mining vessels, begin bombardment pattern Delta. Maximum dispersal." The mining ships, ugly utilitarian craft never meant for combat, opened fire. Not with elegant plasma streams or precise particle beams, but with clouds of metal debris launched at relativistic speeds. Rocks, scrap metal, processed ore, anything with mass accelerated to velocities that turned them into kinetic fury. The effect wasn't elegant. It was brutal. The Devourer ships sailed into the debris, plowed expecting energy they could feed on. Instead, they met matter moving too fast to absorb or deflect. Impacts tore through organic hulls, ripping wounds that bled something black into the void. One of the creatures shuddered, its forward sections collapsing, momentum carrying it forward until it drifted, dying. Through its own destruction. One confirmed kill, Blackwood reported, and Vren heard something like hope in her voice. 14 more damaged. They're adjusting formation, trying to calculate the threat. Second bombardment, Vren ordered. Target the wounded ones. Don't let them recover. More debris clouds launched, and more Devourer ships staggered under impacts they couldn't simply consume. 3 more died, their massive forms going dark. But the rest were learning, adapting, spreading their formation wider, moving in patterns that made targeting difficult. Second wave incoming, Mira called out. They're moving faster. 32 vessels. This wave didn't attempt to tank the bombardment. They moved with purpose, targeting the mining vessels directly. Organic weapons fired, beams of something that wasn't quite energy, but wasn't quite matter either. And where they struck, ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not exploded, just converted into particles that the Devourers absorbed as they passed. Mining vessel prosperity is gone, Tavik reported grimly. Fortune's end destroyed. New dawn breaking apart.